Hello, everyone. Welcome to Daring as Fuck. My name is Veronica Kalinis, and I'm the host. I'm the founder of Vulnerable as Fuck, and I love creating transformational spaces that amplify vulnerability, truth, and courage. So I'm really excited for today's speaker. We have Shoshanna Raven here, and she is epic. You are totally in for a treat today. She is a a friend of mine, and we've been like in each other's circle, like a social media friend, and I've been following her, and we've just been like watching each other grow, and it's been really cool to see. So I'm really excited to have her here. So Shoshanna is a business mentor for heart-centered leaders, visionaries, coaches, and creatives emboldening their voice and growing community-centric businesses. So what I love about Shoshanna is she really is all about being brave. And she talks about transforming shame into power. So she has a podcast called Living Brave. The company is Living Brave. And, she's really open and honest about, the truth about leadership and what happens if it's not all about love and light. It's about being courageous and shedding all the shit that comes with being a leader and, actually putting yourself out there. So, Shoshanna, do you want to say anything? Is there anything I missed that you want people to know about you?
No, thank you so much. That was such a beautiful intro. I'm so happy to finally sit down and just be with you one-to-one, and whoever's catching this conversation. Just so happy that you're here and carving out the time. And yeah, it's really cool with social media, right? You can have these friends that you see that are doing similar things. And the second I saw you were talking about vulnerability and like shame slang, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is one of my people. Let's just be friends. And just invitation to do that online. I've done that so many times. I'm like, okay, this person keeps coming into my orbit, and how cool would it be to build a relationship or start a conversation or collaborate? And so many awesome collaborations have come from that place. And I think it's really embodying that message of community over competition, right? I think that's like a hashtag that's used, but like, what does that actually look like in practice? It's like seeing people who have similar messages and being able to use that as your compass of like, oh my gosh, let's create something beautiful together. Let's learn about each other. So I'm just so glad that we get to do this today.
Me too. So my first question for you, and you talk about being brave a lot, but could you remember a time when you had to be really brave? And it could be, in your business. I know you talk about sometimes, I see in your messaging, like the time when you had a $0 launch. Yeah, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool because I like to look at business growth as the whole human, right? And I think some of my biggest breakthroughs in terms of vulnerability and bravery, which are one and the same for me, have accelerated my business in ways that I didn't really understand at the time, because we were looking at it from a place of truth telling, authenticity, like living a brave and expanded life. That has only supported my business in so many ways that felt really scary. So back to, I don't know what year this was, but let's just say 2018, right? I launched my podcast in 2019, but about a year or two before then, I kind of reached a low point again in my life. When you realize you have many rock bottoms and you're like, oh shit, this thing's going to happen. I thought the first one was the one. I found myself and it was over. And then you cry yourself to sleep one night and you're like, oh damn, I lost my relationship with myself. There's unresolved trauma. There's more healing. What are we going to do? Continue to seek outside of ourselves or rebuild relationship with self? And so this was about 2018 when I realized that I wanted to heal my relationship with myself through healing my shame. And a big part of that narrative was speaking openly about genital herpes. And when I started to do that, so I'd say I gradually started to do that. So for people who, whether it's an STI or something about their sexuality or something that they feel like makes them less than, really the whole message of Living Brave is when there's nothing to find out about you, that is true liberation, right? So there's something that most people are walking around with, feeling like if only they just knew. And so with herpes, that was the thing, right? That was my thing. And so starting to speak openly about herpes was a healing journey for me, because I realized that the only thing blocking me, the only thing in my way, the only person who thought that I was less than was myself. Because when you're really real and vulnerable and you tell your story and you air out the shame, what you find is genuine love, acceptance, courage that's met. When you're courageous, you're met with courage, you're met with stories that rip your heart open, right? So this is what started to happen. And I'd say the hardest, maybe bravest part of that journey was preparing to speak openly about my genital herpes status. I didn't know I wanted a business. I didn't know I wanted a podcast. I just knew whenever I closed my eyes in a meditation, I knew I had to speak openly about this. This is something that 1 in 2 women will have an STI before age 25. So it's like something that people are, falling into depression, becoming suicidal. Like it's this thing that's as common as the cold, and yet people feel like it's the end of their life. I for sure thought it was the end of my love life and my identity as I knew it, thank goodness. But yeah, going and talking to all of those cute guys I had been on dates with and had flings with and made out with at a festival, and was like, hey, I have a story to tell you, and I really care about this, and I'm really passionate about breaking stigma around this. And would tell, these men who I thought saw me as, potential romantic partner. And what I really found was that these people wanted to be my friend and were my friend and saw me as a human and wanted to share their stories. And so I'd say probably being brave and telling the one person that I hadn't been honest with in that process. I had been seeing someone for a few months, and I was kind of in my period of, I said, like falling into the low, and I hadn't been honest and open about herpes. There's a really low chance, right, that you'll catch it if you don't have an outbreak. That said, I'm really passionate about breaking shame and stigma and having open conversations around your sexuality. So the fact that I didn't say it and then I didn't tell him for a few months, that was so scary. I mean, to say the least. I almost threw up like telling him. I was like really just like shaking. I was so nervous. I thought this person was going to be like, you are the scum of the earth, right? And what I was met with is, hey, that makes sense. We didn't communicate. I love you. How can I support you? And that just changed my life, right? This whole experience of herpes, it's the whole reason behind Living Brave podcast, behind coaching, really behind all the leadership and business mentorship that I do now.
I love that. So powerful. Like, I love that you got that. It became so important to you that when you didn't do it, it almost, it hurt. it kind of like, it creates that experience. Like, it's for the people watching. A lot of the people here are wondering, okay, I have this message to share. I have something that happened in the past, or I know I want to leave my job and I don't know how to start because what I want to do is something I've never done before, or is a little taboo and unconventional. What if no one likes it? What if everyone judges me? Right? So there's all these fears, right? And when it's really real, it'll come to this point of like, wow, I have to share this thing. Otherwise it hurts. Like, or it's this only thing I can think about. Like when I started Vulnerable AF, I didn't even have, it wasn't a business idea. It wasn't this, I didn't have a strategy. It was just like, wow, I need to get this out and I need to do it. And I need to do it now. Because, and my story was, I experienced heartbreak and I was sad. And I really just wanted to be heard, and I wanted to deepen my connections with the people that were already in my life. And I realized that, oh, it wasn't because of them that I didn't have the connections that I wanted to have. It was because I hadn't been authentic and vulnerable with anybody. So no one can really feel me or see me. So this is desire to be felt, to be seen. And I did it, and I couldn't stop after that. Right. So that's what leadership starts to look like when you stop making it about yourself.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. I love that we have the similarity in our business journey, because this is truly like long-term sustainable growth. And like this, things will get hard, right? In your business, I truly see as a spiritual growth journey. There are ebbs and flows. Your inner child comes out, your wounding comes out, fear of rejection, fear of failure. It's almost like you're taking a history of being trained to be like a factory worker and really be like clinging to the certainty. And then entrepreneurship, right? Which is, and leadership is holding a vision that doesn't yet exist and taking risks and treating yourself and your ideas like your safest asset. And it's a ride. And so if we are in the space of conditional confidence with ourself at the center of our business, right? Okay, I'm validated, 10 people signed up, I'm happy. Okay, no one's signing up, oh my gosh, I'm stressed. And we go through this roller coaster versus like having this long game legacy anchor in the business. Like I'm sure, Veronica, you're not like, if this next launch doesn't work out, the next 5 don't work out, then maybe I'll go back to whatever job you were doing before, right? Like there's no plan B. And so it makes the small stuff really look like, hey, these are lessons along the way. And this is like something that, this is my life's work. This is like a message that's so much bigger than me. This is a message that's so expansive and so powerful that all of my offers can look different. They can change over time. And I think that's something that people who find me, they're like, oh, you did empowerment coaching, and then you do a storytelling course, and then you talk about wealth creation, and then you have a leadership mastermind. It's like, yes. And it all makes sense because I understand the bigger mission and it's not confusing to me, right? Like this strategy gets super simple when you're like, this is what I'm about. This is what I care about. This is what this community is about. This is why it matters. And I think that's so much more important than having a 5-year vision of exactly like the financials and what things are going to look like. It's like knowing who you are, knowing what you stand for. And that's just going to take you so many places, that faith, that trust, and that what you're doing is worthwhile.
Yeah, totally. And I think, we can start getting attached to the strategy, the website, the graphics. And yeah, I care about those things too. And like, of course, like I think about it, right? But it's more than that, right? It's like, oh, is this message getting across? Like actually I had a really big breakthrough this year, had a huge ego death last year, stripped everything that wasn't truth away. Everything came out. And I really had to look like, okay, who am I? What's my message? Who have I not been being? And who can I be? And I had every reason to quit. I wanted to give up. I kind of ended my business. Like I was like, I can't teach. Like I'm in no place to teach. And I didn't. And I actually gave myself that space. I'm a creative, so I still, even like in the time I'm not teaching, I still was thinking about ideas, right? But I really gave myself that space. And the thing that I came back to was the reason why I started with Vulnerable AF was deepening relationships. And I had all this relationship experience and relational experience that I wasn't sharing that. I wasn't talking about like the weird hippy dippy trainings that I've done, like the shamanic experiences that I have, like my interest in magic. Like I didn't talk about those things because I thought I needed to look a certain way. I thought that's what people wanted from me, right? And that's why it didn't feel good. It blew up in my face. And then when I started coming back to me, is when people can feel me more. And then, then things started flowing differently, right? So it's beautiful that you talk about like, yeah, what's the bigger mission? Why are you doing something? And it's so easy to give up. It's so easy, like, oh my God, I've wanted to quit so many times. And then every time I come back to like, I'm like, this is the thing. Like, this is the thing I care about. This is the thing that matters. This is what people need. All right. So, how would you teach or share with someone who has something really special to share and to speak on, but they just don't know where to start, or they just don't know how to refine their message. They don't know how to get out the thing that is really natural for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It's like the reason I created like my first program, which now almost 100 people have gone through it, which is so fun, but it's the Empowered Business Accelerator. And one of the terms that I really kept seeing coming up with women who were, and I've had men go through the program, but were like, yeah, I have this idea, but like, I don't know where to start. And it was almost like I'm confused. It was this thing that I kept hearing of like, I just need clarity and direction. And I was like, okay, that's starter limbo. I was there for 2 years and it's bullshit. Like, because when I sit down with someone and I'm like, tell me what you're excited about, who you want to serve, what your work is in the world, they're actually very clear. So the starter limbo comes from like just fear of the unknown, right? Getting into this mindset of like, for me, and something I was thinking about this morning is like the power of knowing what you want, yes, but the power of knowing who you are and like taking the first step. Like, I know that I'm someone who's just going to speak my truth. I take risks on myself. I'm going to be in it for the long game. That's so much more powerful than like, what do I want this to look like? Because when I started Living Brave, it was like the podcast, and then it was empowerment coaching, and then it shifted and evolved. And my messaging has changed like every week. My branding changes every week. My color scheme, my vibe, my essence, because I am evolving and changing. So I think the first thing is like getting out of starter limbo, knowing that you can't expect to have the whole path laid out for you and you're paving your own way. It's always one block in front of the other. I think mentorship has been super supportive in terms of just like business foundations. Like, where do you start? I know that when you don't have a community or a mentor in your corner, and you haven't actually been empowered with business foundations, especially as like a healer, a guide, or a coach, it's really not putting ourselves in a good place not to like understand like offer creation and like messaging, to use social media and like all of these things that are super important. So that's like one thing I'm really excited about. But second, I think sometimes we overcomplicate it. Like, where do we start? First, like, get empowered with the foundations and like really like look a little bit deeper. It's like that powerful self-coaching of like, am I really confused about what I'm here to do and say? Right? Like, because your mission's probably pretty clear, like what you're great at, just claiming like, I'm an amazing facilitator, I'm an amazing coach, I'm really good at helping people through hard times, I'm really good at relationship stuff, whatever it is, like claiming that, getting support, and then starting to just share from the heart. I think that speaking to Living Brave, growing from like zero to $750,000 or however much in just over a year, it's not deceiving, but it's like I had been sharing my heart for longer than that. Whether or not I was like selling offers, I'd been showing up and saying like, this happened to me today. I'd been showing up and saying like, here's a lesson, here's a message, here's a story, here's my face that you can feel and see. And I think sometimes when we jump right to like, how am I going to sell this offer? It's like, how can you start to share your heart and shift from here's this inspiring thing that happened to me, here's this thing I went through, to a you and I conversation in leadership, right? This is before we even talk about offers. Like, how can we start to be brave enough to teach people? I think that's like when we go from inspiring to how do I learn more from you, is when you are in a leadership role. And it doesn't mean that you're on the pedestal. It means that you're like, hey, here's something that might help you, right? Versus like, here's this inspiring thing that happened to me today. But like, what are some universal truths about you and I? And really positioning yourself in that leadership. I'd say that's like the first place to start, is like starting to tell stories with lessons for other people, and then going for it and inviting people in. I think we get so stuck in the beginning stages, and at all stages, right? When we get so heady in the planning, and just going for it.
I love that. Yeah. It's like it's easy to get heady in the planning and like the execution and like, what if no one buys it? So I think launching a program and posting on social media is super vulnerable because it's so risky. Vulnerability is risky. There's no guarantee, right? The only thing that you can guarantee is like the willingness to stay in it, right? So it's just like saying I love you. Like there's no guarantee that this person is going to feel the exact same way or is going to get the answer that you want. And that's the bravery. That's why it's vulnerable. That's why it's courageous to put yourself out there.
Do you know there's a Brene Brown quote? She's on a podcast. Maybe it's she's having a podcast with Tim Ferriss and someone else. She was speaking to, the way you know whether or not to share something vulnerable is whether or not your healing depends on other people's response. And so the same in business, right? The same in I love you. Would you still say it no matter what? Like if someone was silent, if no one signed up, would you still do it? So it's like, and that for me, it's like the artist path, especially at the higher levels of business and in my mastermind and with my private clients. I'm like, I want you to take off like this almost like CEO's hat and just drop into like the artist, the creative, the visionary, like the person who puts things out there and is experimenting, is enjoying the process of creating, right? Because when you're saying I love you, when you're sharing your heart, when you're launching a new offer, should come from a place of I do this anyway. Everything else is a bonus. And we know like the detachment also from results is where the magic happens. But that's so important when it comes to doing anything brave. It's like, would I do it anyway, despite the outcome?
Yeah, totally. Like doing the summit, like it's this summit does not, it's not like a part of my gift. Like it's like organizing, logistics, back end stuff, like that is not my gift. And putting a summit together requires a lot of that. All right. So I've had to hire support, right? Because otherwise it wouldn't get done. Or it would get done and it would be depleting on me. And that's not what I want. Right. Like, and yeah, like there's so many reasons why I shouldn't do the summit. Like, you know what? This is a lot of work, blah, blah, blah. It's hard. I don't like organizing, blah, blah, blah. But the outcome of it is like, wow, look who gets impacted by this. Look, the speakers get to share their gifts with new people. I get to meet new people. This message about being brave and vulnerable and daring gets to reach more people. And that's the quantum leap, when you're doing something without the attachment to the outcome. Yeah. Do you have anything specific that you really want to teach and bring to this interview for people, like for anybody who wants to be more vulnerable and brave in their leadership? And speaking to the topic is if they have any shame and how to turn it into their power. Like how would you give someone steps to transmuting that?
Yeah, steps for transmuting. Well, we just talked about Brene Brown. I'm like, go read Daring Greatly. It's such an amazing book. But I would say, yeah, it's like this collapsing of identities is something that I love to talk about in business and in leadership. It's like how liberating to be the same person, out at a coffee shop with your clients, on a podcast with your parents, like this permission to be in your own truth. And I'd say like looking at where we are kind of fitting into these roles, especially as entrepreneurs. I think, of course, we have built-in boundaries, and I love that. I think my brand is an amplification of me and certain aspects of me. And I love that idea of looking at branding and how I show up online. But when we think about like being vulnerable, it's like letting all parts of you be seen. And this is why, I had a day with a friend like a few months ago, and we just went to a brewery and hung out. And then the next day she's like, hey, can a friend join your mastermind? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And it's just for me, like looking at that, like how easy things get to be, how natural things get to be when you're the same person. And I had shared with her like about how one of my programs, like some of these women who I've been working with for a long time, like turned on me, right? And like how like shit hit the fan, how I stepped into leadership and navigated that with someone who I wasn't trying with. I wasn't writing a social post yet or to sign up. I was just like, hey, here I am. Here's my heart on the table. Here's how business is going. And she's like, hey, you're one of my best friends. Can I work with you? Right. And it's just like this beautiful, like there's nothing to hide. It's magnetic, right? When you can speak to your shortcomings, when you can be like your funky, weird self, explore who that really is. And I think this idea of like niching down was so debilitating for me and for so many people, right? Of like, who do I want to serve? And instead, like, who do I want to be? Like, how can I take all these disparate parts of myself and bring them to the table and show behind the scenes of like, you know, how does the witchy stuff come into play if I'm a business coach? Or how does like, you know, my experience in conscious relationship if I am doing this other type of healing work, and bringing all of it to the table, and you create a community that is a niche in itself because they've never seen someone come to the table and take all of these different things and talk about them with this cohesive message. So not quite a tool, but I would say like getting clear on where are the parts of me that I'm only allowing to be seen in certain aspects of my life, and that's not coming from an empowered place of I just want to keep things private. It's coming from, well, what would they say? Does that really fit? But that's a great place to start. And in terms of like personal growth, and I've done a lot of work around empowerment and healing shame for women, of course, that resource, but also like starting to just explore where shame lives in your narrative. And I think sometimes the word shame is like, whoa, that's this big word. And really, shame, all it is I'm not enough. Did I do enough? Did I say enough? And I see this with women at all stages, right? It's like, oh my gosh, in this launch, am I doing enough? Did I say enough? In the relationship, was I enough for this person? Did I do enough? Did I say enough? Oh my God, I'm not enough. And there are so many ways that is developed through a feeling that you're a burden, through a feeling that you're unlovable, like all of these core stories. And often it's like these big initiations, like a genital herpes diagnosis or a breakup or some kind of thing that just reveals the shame, right? Shame finds new evidence. It's not like these things create those stories. So I'd say looking at those stories, trying to identify like guilt versus shame, right? Like I did something wrong, or like I'm a good person. I'm gonna say I think a definition Brene Brown uses is like I'm a good friend, but I was late. So now I feel like I did something wrong. Guilt, one-time guilt versus like I always do this. I'm a bad friend. I like can't be trusted, right? Like understanding the difference between these feelings within yourself. So naming it, speaking it out loud to people that you trust and that you like are in your inner circle. So before we go out online, try to use vulnerability as a strategy to get people to sign up for our programs, like starting to have vulnerable conversations with people around you and starting to heal that way, finding new evidence, and then broadening that circle. And perhaps if you feel called and you feel like it's of service to the world, sharing your stories with a lesson. I think that's where vulnerability, when it comes to leadership, that's the question I always get asked. It's like, you know, you've heard share from the scar. Sometimes it's also powerful to share from something that's healing, right? Like I went on 3 weeks ago and I talked about a couple weeks ago and I talked about my breakup of my 3-year relationship. And I was like, hey, I'm scared because I'm in it still. But like, here are some of the learnings and the lessons and the teachings that have been supportive for me. And so the shares are in service to others. The shares aren't like, here's this thing that happened in the end, right? It's like, what does this get to mean for the collective? And so that's really the journey that I see when we're speaking about like shame slaying and vulnerability when it comes to business and leadership.
I love that. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Like I'm doing the summit, and like I have a plan. Oh, okay. Every day I'm supposed to talk about this. I don't have like specific things that I'm talking about, but every day I am going to talk about the summit, right? But also like what came to me is what I'm hearing a lot of people are asking me about my experience with breakups. and unconscious uncoupling and conscious uncoupling. And I have a lot of experience with it, and I've gone through it twice this year. And like I was like on the plane on my way to Boston, I'm like, I have to make a post about it. And it wasn't like, oh, how can I make a post about it so that people can sign up for my program or sign up for the summit? It was like, no, I need to get this message out because people are asking for it. And I literally have the keys to the kingdom, and I'm just keep holding it all into myself. I'm like, oh, I was on the plane and I took out my laptop and I wrote down, you know, how my experience was with breakup. And even hearing you talk about your experience with a breakup and you sharing it, I'm like, you know, wow, I've gone through these big portals this year, and I've shared a lot. I share a lot about it on social media, but like, wow, I'm like, there's so much more I can share. Like, there's so much more I can share. And it's like, it's not about so that someone can do something on the back end. It's like, oh, like, wow, like I'm still going through this. And also, as much as I talk about vulnerability, it's important for me for people to see me and feel me. Right. And it's like constantly shedding the identity, collapsing the identity, because yeah, like the thing that stops a lot of people is this perception of, I need to look like a leader. I need to be perfect, and my content needs to look good all the time, and I need to look this way and look successful. No, it's people want to know who you are and feel you and hear you as well, and hear about what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
This is like getting me so excited and inspired to talk more about this identity work. Yeah, and that's
So
like, that's
good.
magnetic. You know, all the leaders that we look up to, there's no doubt. Are they walking their talk, right? That might be like a wound within us. I think that's when I always realize I'm triggered, is when I'm like trying to poke holes in someone else's story. Like, do they really work that much? Are they really happy in their relationship? Is there like, and I'm like, whoa, I'm trying to poke holes in their story because I can't like accept that this is reality. It's something different than that. I mean, like the leaders that you look up to and who are like really magnetic, there's not this like that's their identity, right? That's who they are. And there's no wavering there. So I think like when we're thinking of business and business growth and community growth, it's like, how can you be the living, breathing embodiment of your message and continue to find the edge of your voice and continue to find the gap in the conversation where you're like, wow, like this is, people are needing this. No one's talking about this. It's kind of edgy. Of course I'm scared. I always see imposter syndrome. I always see fear as a green light, not a red flag. Like, wow, exactly. You know, I've had mentors say that to me as well. They're like, how are things going? I'm like, good. I'm launching this thing. Everything's going great. I'm scared as hell. And they're like, awesome. Sounds like you're on the right track. Like it sounds right.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So as we start wrapping up, I can probably talk about this with you for hours, very clearly. But as we start wrapping up, do you have any last tools, words of wisdom, words of encouragement for our listeners?
Yeah. I'm like, what is it? One thing that there's so many people out there who are like, you know, be brave, take the leap. And the best thing that we can cultivate is faith. Faith in that things are always working out in your favor, even when it looks like they aren't. And when you have that attitude that everything is truly working out for me, like I trust that, then things can't not work out for you. Like they just can't. Like the hard things happen and you feel them, but you know, like there's no way you can't grow. And so what if we lived life and you got to look back down the road 10 years from now and say, like, I'm so happy that instead of worrying and stressing, getting to the same place, we're all going to the same place, right? I walked this path with more faith, with a commitment to something bigger than me, and with trust that I can't not grow. What's for me is going to be here. What's not for me is not here. And I think that's that presence and that gratitude for what we have right now. It's like, if it was meant for me, it'd be for me. And so right here, right now, like looking up, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful to be here having this conversation with you. Not everything is the way I thought it would be. I have no idea what's to come. The past is the past. And so just this gratitude and this commitment and enthusiasm for what you're doing right now and faith in where you're going. I think I'm so tired of being in masterminds and programs with women who have just created extraordinary results and who are just so debilitated and afraid of what's next and if they can do it again. And so just knowing, like just knowing that you're exactly where you need to be, and having faith in that is so important.
So
It's been
good.
something that's super alive for me lately.
Yeah, faith is so, it's so needed in anything that you're doing. Like I developed a stronger sense of faith during my ego death. Like during the most painful and one of the worst times in my adult life that happened last year and the beginning of this year. And I felt connected to God for the first time. Like really tuned in to my higher consciousness and spirit. And I had faith. Like, I'm so grateful for that experience. It was such a gift, because now when things happen that, like when things happen that, that didn't turn out the way I want it to be, it's like, wow, I have faith and connection to something greater than me, more so than I did in the beginning stages of my business. And that's what's working for me. Like, it made hearing you share what you shared, it made me think of like my short time in New York City as I'm visiting from the States, and I'm on a mission to like get my storage and do all this stuff. I'm lugging around a huge luggage in New York City, and I go to the airport and I'm like carrying this luggage around and it's fucking heavy. And all of a sudden this guy puts his hand on my shoulders and he literally helps me bring this heavy ass luggage down the escalator to my next stop on the subway. I didn't have to it was so easy. And I was afraid of it being hard, right? And like, it was just so easy. And it's like, it reminded me like, wow, I'm so supported. When you keep thinking about life as if you are so supported and guided because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in this world, right? Or I'm on a path to doing that. It's like, you're always guided, you're always supported. And when you can just see things as they are and see things for that they're happening for you and not to you, things change.
I love that story. And
yeah,
it's just so important. It's like cultivating that safety within yourself, right? Like looking in all of these different places, whether it's like your business milestone, the monthly milestone, or in the relationship or in some kind of validation. It's like so many too, like the food body relationship, like all of that. It's like, what are you looking for? And so coming back to like that safety within who you know yourself to be, and safety and faith that things are really working out for you. That's been my biggest growth edge over the past year, is like, it really doesn't matter. Like, I care so much about what I'm doing, but what really matters is like, what the true win is, like knowing who I am and trusting that everything is working out for me and just having a little more fun. That's it. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah. And like, and noticing the things that are happening for you, even if it sucks. Like, you lose your job, you go through a breakup, and it feels like it is the worst thing that can happen. And if you allow yourself to feel it, don't bulldoze and do the thing that you cover up everything with, like work. Like for me, it's work. Like, I'm like, oh, like, let me go to my computer and just cover up my feelings with work. Right? Feel it, allow it to move through you, and trust that this is exactly what's supposed to happen. even if it sucks. So yeah, I love this conversation. Shoshanna, I know you have a free gift for everybody. You have your masterclass, Next Level Leadership, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Speak more to that.
Yeah, it's definitely a blend of like some of my philosophy when it comes to business growth, and leadership growth. So I'm really excited about it. It was really fun. I think I did it back in January. It's so cool, like how much things can change in 5 months. But this is one, or however long it's been, but this is one that I really love. So yeah, I'm so glad to offer that and to connect with anyone
Thank
who's
you.
watching. And I'm pretty active on Instagram, so you can literally message me and I will answer, and just let me know if anything in this conversation resonated with you today. I'd love to hear it.
Love it. Yeah. If anybody, let us know what your key takeaways were, what you're learning from this conversation, and what are you planning to implement in your life now that you've taken these tools and wisdom with you? Like, what's next for you? And let us know. We'd love to hear. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shoshanna, so much. This is amazing. I can't wait for people to hear, and I'm really excited to learn more about what people have received from this, and I'm excited about our relationship as well. I have a feeling that we're going to see each other more.
Yeah. Yay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You're so welcome. Thank you, everyone.